All right, and we are recording. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Boulder County Regional Opioid Council. Today is December 13th, 2022, and it's 3:30, and we are holding this meeting virtually. So I think I'm going to do what I always do, which is to turn the meeting over to Robin to run. I think everybody hopefully has the agenda in front of you. We're going to be reviewing the additional information that we got on the programs that we conceptually agreed to in the first meeting. But I think we agreed to the broad areas and the basic, the basic allocations of money among the different buckets, but we wanted some more information on some of the programs before making a final decision. And I'll just note before do I have to take attendance? We need an official record of who's here, Robin, for any reason?
We're capturing that, Claire. You don't need to.
Okay, I was just going to read off who's here, but I'd rather not. So. Okay, well, I think I've done everything that I actually need or want to do, and I'm going to turn it over to Robin to take us through the materials we have today.
Thank you, Claire. Welcome, everybody. And Claire, I'm going to pass the ball over to Kelly Veit, who's going to facilitate the meeting today. And I really want to appreciate Kelly for all of her work with as well as with our staff and Community Opioids Operations Group that have compiled the materials for today. So Kelly, I think you're going to share your screen. I see you moving in that direction right now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robin, and thank you, members of the council. Just a minute. Let me go ahead and share. All right. So just a quick recap of our agenda for today. So again, same virtual meeting guidelines that we've had for the last two meetings. This is open to the public. However, we do ask that any public comments or comments from members of the public are put into the chat, and know that the deliberations and the discussion will be mainly contained to the council members. So in terms of our agenda today, we're going to start with a quick recap of our progress to date. Review of the shovel-ready projects. So specifically, we're going to be pulling forward a presentation from members of the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and the DA's office to speak to some of those specific CJ-focused investigative equipment asks that council members called out in our last meeting as wanting to have a little bit more information on. And then we're going to hold time for council members to open up any sort of discussion, takeaway, or specific questions that they had after having a chance to review the supplemental project-specific information that was sent out earlier this month. That was a pretty robust document, so thanks for everyone taking the time to kind of look through those additional project information pieces. And we will just be letting, if there are specific kind of more weedy questions that we have on any of those projects, we also have Tucker available to kind of pull up that document in real time and help us answer any of those specifics if they come up. And then we'll be voting to approve the project amounts that are allocated to all of the projects. We'll be talking a little bit about a recommendation, or rather lining up the infrastructure grant that has been put forward by the state in addition to some of these opioid abatement funds. And, for allowing the council members to let us know if there's any opportunities or methods or approaches they'd like us to pursue in obtaining those grants. And then I'll be talking a little bit about strategic planning coming forward in 2023, and Robin will be closing us out with a little bit of discussion on scheduling for our meetings going forward. So a quick recap to date of our progress. We have had an opioid operations group, which is really advisory in nature, convening since May. The roster of this group is comprised of subject matter experts across the sort of 5 approved purpose areas, the care continuum, from harm reduction, prevention, all the way through to criminal justice, treatment and recovery. That group did put forward 25 projects as our initial set of recommendations for this first funding drop. Those again are shovel-ready projects, or really projects that are already across those 5 approved purpose areas and in need of additional funding. So they're already standing and able to take these funds and put them into operations very quickly. In our September meeting, we gave you an introduction to that process, the process that the opioid operations group has had. We talked about our general funding amounts, our timeline, and our methodology around that shovel-ready approach. In October, the group came together to look at the shovel-ready projects and did approve the funding allocations across the 3 main category areas. And then from there, staff were able to put our recommendations into the state's cost system. And from, basically designating what our amounts are across those 3 approved purpose areas and to draw down the funds from the state. However, we did decide that we wanted a little bit more information about the specific projects in order to feel comfortable approving the funding amounts to each of those projects. So that's really our work for today. So shovel-ready recommendations. First, I want to queue up just a presentation from our partners at Boulder County Sheriff's Office, the Boulder County Drug Task Force, and the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. As a reminder, we did have 3 projects that were brought forward, requested by Boulder County Sheriff's Office that had to do with investigative equipment or interdiction tools in identifying the source of incoming opioids to our region. And so council members did ask for additional information in the form of a presentation on these 3 particular areas. So just as a reminder, what those projects are: Celebite Premium, which has recently been amended to include Nighthawk and Magnate. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But so basically, these tools are in addition to the Celebrite Premium licenses that were requested. And so, Commander Goldberger can speak a little bit more to how this might affect the funding ask, but we also want to use this opportunity to queue up a vote that we're going to have later in our conversation today to see if council members are comfortable allowing a 10% amendment in some of these requested funds to account for some of these changes that have happened in terms of inflation, different costs to products, or staffing adjustments that have taken place since we originally put forward our asks. Gray Key and TrueNarc also will be presented on today. So with that, we have 3 presenters: Commander Nico Goldberger from the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and the Boulder County Drug Task Force, Ken Kupfner from the Boulder County DA's Office, and Sergeant Jeff Pelletier from Boulder County Sheriff's Office. And I will go ahead and stop babbling and see if our presenters are able to share from here.
All right, Kelly, I'll take it from here. Can you all hear me, folks? Perfect. Good afternoon, council members and folks in the public out there listening. My name is Nick Goldberger. I'm a commander with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and the commander for the Boulder County Drug Task Force. I want to give you a little lay of the land with a good foundation of starting of what we have going on here. And then I'll give a real quick brief uptake of what this equipment, the titles of the equipment, and then Sergeant Pelletier will really go into some of the questions, or hopefully answer some of the questions some of you had for the council about it. And then Ken will jump in with any legality questions that you might have as well. So make up the drug task force is representation from the Sheriff's Office, Boulder Police Department, DA's Office, Erie Police Department, and Lafayette. Erie is leaving the drug task force July of 23. And then there's, of course, all the other law enforcement entities in Boulder County, to include Louisville, CUPD, Longmont, who are not in the drug task force. Longmont does have a special investigation unit that does as well work with trying to combat the influx of narcotics into the county. The projects that we've presented to you actually have been thought out to actually cover all of the jurisdictions in Boulder County, and especially when we are working with our digital forensics lab, which does actually take in a lot of the evidence or phones or electronics from all of our jurisdictions in the county to help in investigations. reference opioid overdoses and other crimes. This, the project, this is actually the only one of the 20+ projects that is directed at stemming the flow of the influx of narcotics coming into our community. So I wanted to focus that as well. General lay of how an investigation starts. We get called out, we go to a scene, and what we always, or I should say 90+% of the time, come into contact with a digital media, whether it's a phone or a computer of some sort. Some of the times those are locked. And as you know, you all have security functions on your phones. If that function is on, we can't get into the phone. Meaning, if we're trying to find out how somebody perished and knowing that a phone is the primary communication medium to go between another person or multiple people, the best way that we can solve a criminal episode or a very tragic death is to try to get in the phone. So these products that we're talking about, the Celebrite Premiums, Nighthawk, Gray Key, are items that can get into the phones, which Jeff will talk about for you. What is also tough is once an incident occurs, the clock is ticking on some evidence that might help solve a crime on how somebody died. And with that is because some social media platforms, whether they're encrypted, their retention schedules are so short, we have to get in the phone quicker so we can send a letter to the, let's call them, I don't want to pick on any social media platforms, but send a letter to the mobile media platforms to say, hold all that information. We're applying for a court order to obtain information to get into the phone and then to get into whatever mediums we're talking about. So that's very important. Biggest thing is when we are trying to get into a phone for a suspect or somebody else, not including the decedent in most cases, we are applying for a court order for that phone company, for that social media app. So we're following all the laws in the land. So with that, well, one thing I'll talk to. Jeff will talk to all the equipment that is used. I will talk to one that is not, that he will not talk to, and that's called TrueNarc. TrueNarc is a drug and or explosive detecting device. It's kind of like a laser that you point at a substance. This has an internal library that will indicate what kind of substance we are looking at when we see maybe a baggie of a white powder or a pill of some sort. You point the laser at it and it identifies that substance. That is great to know on scene during that time, because you can also tell if it is either an illegal substance or, more importantly, if it's a dangerous substance to humans of any sort, or if it's an explosive. So that is what TrueNarc is, and we're looking at one of those. And at this point, I'll pass this on to Sergeant Pelletier to talk about the specifics of the other equipment that we have.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. So I thought a little bit about how best to present this in the limited time. And I think the best way is to kind of sort of picture an assembly line when we talk about these devices. I'll start with the Grayshift, Gray Key, and Celebrate Premium. So Grayshift is the company, Gray Key is their product. Celebrate is a company, and Premium is their product. So they're similar in that they access devices that are locked that we could not otherwise get into. So essentially what they're doing is getting us data that we otherwise would not have. So an example you could have is an overdose victim with a phone in their pocket. Generally, the information on where they obtained the lethal dose of drugs will be contained within the phone. They can't provide the passcode. Family generally does not know it. So the only way to access that data is through a product like Gray Key or Premium. The flip to that is a suspected dealer. We have a search warrant for their phone. They're unwilling to provide the passcode or swipe pattern. This would allow us to get that data that we, again, otherwise would not be able to access. They are similar in that they get data from locked devices. Where they're different is that Gray Key specializes in Apple devices or iOS devices. It can do limited Android devices. When I say Android, I'm talking about like Motorola, the Samsungs, the Alcatel, pretty much anything that's not Apple or Windows based. And premium is the specializes in more of the Android platform and has limited access to iOS devices. So they are similar in that they access the data, but one sort of specializes in Apple, the other one specializes in Android. So once we get the data out of the device, we have to, basically it's just a bunch of scrambled ones and zeros. It's a bunch of data that we can't really read without a special tool. So Magnet Forensics is the company, Axiom is their product. Axiom basically takes the data that we got out of the phone and makes it so that an investigator can look at it. They can view the pictures, the messages with a suspected dealer and that sort of thing, plus the messages with potential other victims, which I'll talk about here in a second. So Axiom is a product that takes the data, makes it so that we can look at it, and then we can actually make a portable case with it and provide that data to another investigator so they can look at it for their investigation. Then the last step, that sort of assembly line in the investigative process, is Nighthawk. Their product is called LEO Vision. So Nighthawk, the best way I can explain it is it is an analysis tool. Nighthawk will take data from an Android phone, an Apple phone, cloud data returns from any sort of messaging platform you can picture if we were to obtain a search warrant to collect that data from somebody, and then cell records like from AT&T or Verizon, and it ingests all of that and it puts it all together. What that allows investigators to do is perform some link analysis. So what that can do is show you where people are communicating with each other. Can also maybe point out other potential victims that are buying the same drug that someone was an overdose victim of, and those sorts of things. So it's basically an assembly line process in that we have to be able to get the data out of the locked device that without these products we wouldn't get. We have to be able to process it so we can look at it, and then we put it all together in a product like Nighthawk. And that's the best way I can explain it.
And just-
So, sorry, on that note is for any of the council members, I know there were some legal questions, and I'd leave those questions to you straight to Ken, unless you had something for Sergeant Pelletier or myself directly, if that helps you.
Robin, quick question. Do you want us to pose questions now or should we wait until the end?
I think it's up to you all. I think asking any questions based on Commander Goldberger and Sergeant Pelletier's presentation right now might be good. And then we can move into more legal questions. But it's really up to you all how you'd like to manage that. Are there any questions based on the two presentations, or people eager to hear from Ken at this point?
Well, then I have a quick question then, but I'm also, I mean, it's more of a general question, and I'm still struggling myself. It's not that I don't necessarily agree with it, but I guess I'm struggling to put together why these funds are the right funds to be using for this type of intervention. It feels like the unlocking of phones, frankly, is a tool that law enforcement needs for all sorts of different types of activities. It's not necessarily related to knowing what the substance abuse or trying to track back the income and the flow, right? Like I haven't heard yet if there are limitations on the use of that. I presume there are not. Once you have this equipment, you can use it for any type of intervention that requires an unlocking of a device, regardless of whether it is opioid or substance related for any type of crime. I don't know yet so I guess I'm struggling to identify why this pot of funds for this type of tech tool that I think law enforcement needs just in general. That's where I'm coming from.
You want that one, Nick?
Yeah, I'll speak to it, and then if there's something I missed, please jump in, Jeff. So on your question, very good points. things that are hindrance to different police departments, law enforcement is one is cost, finding different grants out there that can cover it. However, as I stated before, this would be the only project that is given to you that is, in a sense, trying to turn off the flow of drugs coming into Boulder County. And I'm speaking right now of opioids, right? So with that, if we don't turn off the flow, all the treatments will do what they do, and they're doing a great job. However, we should be battling it at both ends, and this is the only one doing that. And being opioid specific and being such a deadly problem, that's where I see it as appropriate, because it does talk about, initially it was the criminal justice. This is it. We're stopping and really attempting to stop that influx. And these are great tools and resources to do it over the multiple years that are projected.
Commissioner Levy and Sheriff Pelley, I'm not sure who had their hand up first.
I don't think it matters. I suspect that Sheriff Pelley wants to respond to that question, and I think I'm going to jump in front of him just because my question is basically the same as Nuria's. I guess I wonder, this does sound like just a law enforcement tool. And I appreciate the point you made, Commander Goldberger, about, trying to stop the influx of drugs and, and find, the dealers who have killed people. But I wonder with, all the other law enforcement tools that the Sheriff's Department and the various police departments use, where the funding for that comes from, because I think I'm having the same kind of questions. I guess I don't even want to say concerns that Nuria is expressing about whether this is the right pot of money or whether we ought to try to find some other funds for these purposes.
Hi, so I'll try to answer this the best I think I can. The way that the governance of this money, a portion of it is apportioned to law enforcement, to doing law enforcement. And so the grants and the way the money is divided up, there is a chunk that's dedicated for this purpose, and our subcommittee identified these tools as the best use of that funding. I think you're asking a great question, but my understanding, and Robin may have to correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to spend some funds on interdiction and law enforcement as part of the package. And this group of folks believes this is the best use of that funding to buy some pretty expensive equipment and to supplement the equipment that we have already.
Yeah, thank you, Sheriff Pelley. I do believe you're correct. And I know at our last meeting, and I invite Kelly or Tucker on the call. Remember, we talked about the 5 buckets that were then condensed into 3 buckets because of the state system. So where this ended up in terms of the final 3 categories, Kelly, I don't know if you have a comment about that. You all had a great pie chart showing that the last time we met. And then I don't know if there's anyone on the call that also, we could certainly find this out, but in terms of the settlement and how this flow of these specific dollars were articulated during the settlement and the actual litigation. Kelly, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can say that they were kept in the criminal justice bucket when we had the 5 approved purpose areas. In terms of where they were entered into the cost system, I might ask Tucker behind the scenes to do a little bit of digging, but I would imagine they were probably put into the prevention bucket since they're not treatment. So I think it was just prevention, treatment, and then other. So I might ask Tucker if he could dig around for that and validate that these 3 projects were entered into the cost system in the prevention bucket. Let's see if he can validate that for us.
Great. Harold, I see your hand up.
Yeah, let me take my hand down. I guess on the question of the appropriate location or where it's funded, I guess my question would be, as part of the note, and this may be more to Joe, as part of the normal budget requests that we have within our existing entities, were these submitted as part of that process? And how did that funding evaluation go within the respective budget processes?
These were not in our last budget go round.
Okay.
We have some of these tools. I think what they're trying to do is make them more available for more of the investigative agencies across the county.
Gotcha.
Nick, you want to take a stab at that, Nick?
Certainly. Yes, our forensic lab does have a few of these tools. However, we have a backlog, and Jeff can speak to this. We have a backlog of so many phones that are associated with overdoses that are still in line because of the limited number of equipment. That's one. The other thing is the intended ask here is actually to cover all the law enforcement, or as many as you can, law enforcement agencies, because if I didn't state it before, is if somebody has a phone that needs to be looked at, it comes to the forensic lab to do a lot of that work because they are the experts. We have the Drug Task Force a Celebrite reader that helps to read things, but it doesn't do the extraction, everything that Jeff talked about for the premium and for the gray key. Jeff, is that accurate, or did I mispronounce anything or state?
No, it's accurate. There's really no good way to put this other than essentially they're just competing with each other, right, in the backlog. So when you get the overdose case like Commander Goldberger was talking about, time is of the essence to try to get the data. Again, like I mentioned, find other potential victims that bought from the same dealer. That time is of the essence there. What happens is we have limited equipment, and when an overdose phone comes in, it's an ASAP, we need this right now, but there's usually a line of other homicide or other major investigation phones waiting, and we have to figure out a way to prioritize that, and sometimes those overdose phones get trumped essentially.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think as it relates to the opioid dollars, I don't know if anyone's had this conversation, but recently I have had a conversation with a parent whose child overdosed, and still have the phone because you can't get to it because obviously the priority issues and the other components on this. And so I think understanding that piece for me underscored, I think, why it's important to have this so you can move through it quickly, because there's a closure component on the victim side of it. I think also there's a host of articles about how dating back to 2015 or so, about how the world of dealing and trafficking has shifted to the online portals. And, you know, in terms of what we're seeing real world, it is a real issue in terms of dealing with the supply on this. So practically speaking, at least what I've been seeing recently, I do see the need in this because I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. And so I'm supported based on what I've seen and what we've had to deal with recently in our community.
Could I get a little more clarification on, I guess, what Kelly was speaking to in terms of the 5 areas, approved purposes for funding, and one of them being criminal justice, and going back to a slide we got at a previous meeting, criminal justice under that was law enforcement, community corrections, jail-based addiction treatment, post-incarceration, social, and then I have a little thing here that doesn't let me see the last word on there. And then, and I think this was from our September meeting, the weaknesses and needs that were identified in criminal justice were workforce shortages, and lack of sustainable funding for medication-assisted treatment in jail, diversion opportunities, to provide upstream intervention and avoid criminal system entry, community reentry services. Oh, darn it, this little thing keeps coming up. Peer supports, basically testing, treatment and peer supports for juveniles. And, you know, I guess as I look at those things, I'm wondering, I think what Sheriff Pelley said, I could have been construed to mean that we're required to spend some money on law enforcement versus the regional opioid or the opioid working group agreed on this as a bucket. Because I'm having trouble still. You've made a very good case for the need for these tools. But I am having trouble matching that up with my understanding of what we're supposed to be spending opioid settlement monies on, which is harm reduction treatment, trying to keep people from using addictive substances in the first place.
Yeah, so I mean, what I would say is there is no requirement to spend across the 5 approved purpose areas. Those are just the parameters within which we are allowed to spend our dollars. In terms of the strengths and weaknesses that were identified in the criminal justice sort of category, I would say there was maybe just less awareness of these types of tools. I think this was, you know, maybe the first kind of introduction to, you know, interdiction tools more broadly to the group, to the opioid operations group. And so there was a fair amount of discussion about what these tools can accomplish in terms of opioid abatement. And the last thing I'll say is that I think these are potentially viewed as a prevention effort. And so prevention is an additional sort of category across the 5 approved purpose areas. So really trying to frame this as something that does potentially prevent the proliferation, excuse me, of those drugs more broadly across the Boulder County region.
And Tucker did put the definition of this subcategory in the chat. That might provide some more clarity. Nerea, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I want to make clear that my questions are not because I don't think it's a good tool for law enforcement. I totally think it is. It's more of where does funding come from and is that the appropriate use? So I think what I heard was this would help with the backlog that we're perhaps in terms of prioritization. There are other cases that take precedent over some of these sort of substance abuse cases. And so if someone can share a little bit more about how would that, I mean, this purchase, like data wise, how would that actually elevate? Because otherwise I don't have entry into knowing, will that actually address the backlog? Will it really help in prevention efforts, or will it just help sort of law enforcement continue to catch up from that backlog? And I just don't know. I can see the true narc ask being one where perhaps it could pinpoint as new drugs are coming into our system as they're changing, because certainly they change over time, they're mixed over time. Maybe that's a quick one to be like, well, that will enable us to quickly adjust and adapt new forms of treatment if we know exactly what's coming into our community. So I can sort of stretch and see where that one looks into, but I don't have insight onto what acquiring more equipment will do to these prevention efforts, like in real time, as I continue to sort of stretch this use of the opioid settlement dollars. But by no means do I suggest that law enforcement doesn't need and continue to have more tools in the toolbox.
Nerea, this is Joe. I would stress also that the True Narc is an officer safety tool. The way we would do preliminary testing of drugs in the past is with chemicals, and with drugs like fentanyl and that kind of thing, the chemical now can cause explosions and can cause fatal fumes and be a really very high risk for our cops. The True Narc, the laser beam sort of testing mechanism, allows them to test through the packaging and not open that up and not mix it with chemicals. in order to get a field level identification of what they're dealing with. So I would hope that we could at least do that. And I'm going to throw it back to Jeff Pelletier, who's the sergeant in our computer forensic lab, to talk about handling the backlog and how more equipment could help with that.
Yeah, and I can tell, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So what we're talking about with the money is actually putting these units in these physical devices, the gray key and the premium, in the units whose purpose is to stop the flow of these drugs and prevent the overdose deaths and the delivery of these dangerous drugs. So the difference is where the forensic lab, we intake devices from everyone in the county for a wide range of crimes, pretty much anything you can think of. There's digital evidence involved in it now. So we take devices in. If there's a homicide in Lafayette, Louisville, Erie, unincorporated county, we take in all of those devices, and we're trying to supplement the capabilities we have here, but also add devices in the drug task force, in the drug investigative unit within the city of Longmont, so that there is no conflict. If the drug task force works an overdose, they can bring the phone straight back, go into their own office, grab the data, and we can process it. So there is no conflict between those cases anymore, and that's how you eliminate the backlog, because it's not competing with anything anymore, if that makes sense.
If I could add some tragic numbers to what we currently have, and I'm only going to speak to the point of the drug task force right now. We are currently working 20 overdose drug suspected deaths right now. Our detectives are working those. We need the equipment so we can do our best to investigate those. And that's just the drug task force. I'm not speaking to Longmont or Louisville or CU, but that's just us, and those are lives. And this equipment will help us do a quality investigation. We have already been successful working with the DA's office on a successful prosecution on a male subject who was a drug trafficker and a female perished. We also have current investigations ongoing with the DA's office that are looking very fruitful for prosecution on the same type of charges, as well as working with the DEA on one for multiple suspects doing drug trafficking in our community, as well as the U.S. Postal Service working on a case with them. So it's in our county. Things will continue to come into our county. Perfect example is the 45 pounds of fentanyl / cocaine that was seized about a week and a half ago. That's a lot of stuff that can kill you. If you look at the numbers, that was enough to kill maybe 10 million people. But that's the thing where we're trying to use these devices to investigate, to stop those people from bringing it in, or at the very least, just seizing those products.
Susan, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Robin. So I feel like this makes sense as far as the scope of the work that we're looking for these dollars. And if we think about kind of a continuum of services, I think these tools make sense. I do have a question though about the funds, and this is probably for Kelly. So I know for our House Bill 215 funds, the marijuana funds that come down, we have to be able to show that every dollar went directly to supporting prevention or intervention of substance use. So that's my only question about this tool, is it's not only going to be used around opioids, it would be used much more broadly, correct?
The use of the tool, is that a question?
Well, no, I think it's more around the monitoring of these, the monitoring of these dollars. So I just wanted to make sure we're not getting in a situation where we're broadening the scope of something that we're paying for, that it's going to be used certainly for, in this case, for prevention of drugs coming into Boulder County, but is it also going to be used for a lot of other things where we could have some issues?
So as far as I understand, the interdiction tools are identified in the approved uses, so in the cost system. In terms of the direct reporting and monitoring, I don't have a ton of clarity from the state yet on whether or not we need to do sort of a dollar-to-dollar match to really validate, you know, the extent to which every dollar and cent was used for an approved purpose. But it is my understanding that this would be an approved area to spend the dollars, and that we would be able to, you know, show that the dollars went to interdiction for the most part to prevent the spread of drugs within our community.
Great, thanks. That's helpful. And again, I think just from my perspective, I know we're not voting on this right now. I think it's important that we think about a full continuum, and whatever tools we can put in place to try to prevent, I think is really important.
Thank you, Susan. So I didn't know if those questions.
Sorry to enter. Oh,
I'm sorry. I just didn't know if there were any specific questions for Ken, and if people felt like this was an opportunity to move on to ask questions or have concerns about the other projects. So Kelly, if you wanted to take us in a different direction, I apologize.
oh no, that's fine. I was just going to say, Jim had mentioned that he might have something to add to Susan's question. So I was going to see if he had anything additional to add before moving forward.
Yeah, I was just going to say this came up as a part of our deliberations on the appropriateness of different projects. And the AG's office recognizes that you can't make every dollar go directly to an opioid response, that you try to go in that direction as much as possible, but recognizing that the use of these substances overlap in different environments. And so it's appropriate to look at this as an interdiction tool that will be used for opioids, perhaps primarily, but also that it would be beneficial for other substances as well.
Great, that's helpful, Jim. Thank you.
So before moving forward, did just want to pause and see if Ken had any additions from the legal perspective.
Thanks, Kelly. I mean, I would bring the DA perspective. If I can just have a few minutes, I would say that one of the greatest frustrations that I've had in trying to respond to these cases is the inability to quickly test these devices and identify where the drugs are coming from, what the drugs are being marketed as. We are now seeing fentanyl in virtually every substance that's being marketed, everything from Xanax to cocaine to meth. Like there's fentanyl in everything, and having an idea of what's killing folks as quickly as possible is incredibly important, not only from an interdiction enforcement side, but also from a just community safety standpoint in being able to get the message out of, hey, this was marketed as cocaine and it really was fentanyl. The way that we have to get that information is through these devices. The level of frustration that I have, I receive a call from the coroner's office on every single overdose or poisoning death that they respond to. If they suspect that it is something involving substances, I receive a notification on every one of those responses from the coroner's office. My two questions are always the same in response to those calls. Is there a device? Do we have a phone on scene from the decedent? And are detectives on scene? And are we able to get into the phone? Those are largely based on a desire to figure out what substances were involved and where those substances came from. Is this something that we're going to have like 10 of these this weekend because of the nature of what substances being marketed and distributed in the community, and what do we need to be preparing for? Unfortunately, too often the response is, we can't process that device. We don't have the resources to process that. I have been begging the task force and our folks who are responding to these overdoses, we have to have the ability to process these devices quickly in order to gain this information. I have shared Harold's experience in talking to the parents way too many times of folks who are dying in these instances. And it is simply an unacceptable response for us to say to them, we don't know where they got the drugs. We're not sure exactly what drugs they were told they were receiving or what information they have. And it's 3 months or 6 months into the investigation. And the reason that we can't get that information is at this point in time, that phone is sitting in a stack of phones behind all of the homicide cases that we've had in Boulder County in the last 6 months. And unfortunately, we have to prioritize these devices. Giving the ability to the drug task force and any other agency who's investigating one of these to have access to their own devices so that these devices involved in the overdose deaths are not getting put behind the homicide cases is just a huge step in the right direction in identifying what drugs are being marketed or what they're being marketed as well as who's selling them and where they're coming from. I can't stress from my perspective, both as a SUAG member and in talking to all of our community partners that are really immersed in this epidemic that we're experiencing when it comes to the fentanyl crisis, being able to not have adequate answers to them on how we're responding is just really frustrating. With respect to the TrueNarc, very quickly, we have had to negotiate some different deals with law enforcement from a prosecution standpoint because of the fentanyl scares and the danger with there's a lot of debate about it, but a lot of agencies are not willing to take the risk to their officers of opening up bags of what is suspected to have that is suspected to contain fentanyl. In response to that, we oftentimes are not able to have an identification of those drugs. We can't do anything with the case unless we're able to identify the drugs in a timely fashion. We cannot send the drugs to CBI and wait for those results to come back before charging a case. And so we're in a really difficult position. The TrueNarc eliminates those dangers. It creates a scenario where we're able to quickly identify the drugs. And again, we can identify specifically with the spectrums that are provided in the library what substances are within that sample. So I'm a huge proponent of getting these devices to the folks that can utilize them in these situations. We don't have that capacity right now, and waiting months and months for a device to be processed to try and identify where the drugs came from and what they were marketed as. We're too far behind the curve if we identify those things 3 months, 6 months down the road. Having an ability to do it quickly on scene is something that we have to have at this point. I will assure you that our office has 2 individuals, 2 prosecutors assigned to the drug task force and working with the other drug enforcement folks. Everything is done legally. There's a legal basis for every single thing that we do. There are court orders, search warrants that are done whenever those are necessary from a legal perspective. These are not like black ops things that the task force or any of our law enforcement partners are out there utilizing in an illegal manner. Everything is done with the DA approval and done in a manner consistent with both state and federal law. And so these are simply devices that allow us the mechanism to execute lawful court orders. Even if a judge orders a device to be searched or gives us permission through a search warrant to search a device, unless we have the ability to get into that device, that court order means nothing. That search warrant means nothing unless we have the ability to actually follow the judge's order and analyze that device. These 2 tools give us that ability to get into devices when we have a lawful right to do so. Sorry for it being long. I know you guys have a lot to cover, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them on the legal side of things as well.
Thank you, Ken. Nerea?
Sorry, just one more question, and I'm hoping, and I don't mean to harp on it. And again, I am a supporter of law enforcement. I have no doubt that the tools are used appropriately. So please hear that from me. I guess the one thing I want to just, I heard, and maybe that makes a difference, right? To me, it's about source of funds for some of these tools. Because if not, why not ask for them in the regular course of a budget process, or are there other sources to do that appropriately? But Ken, maybe what I heard from you, and maybe I missed it and it was said before, will these tools be used sort of exclusively for the Boulder County Drug Task Force and the work that they do? Because otherwise my concern is that it's just another tool generally, and I don't know what nexus that will continue to have on drug related cases versus continuing to be subsumed within homicides or other like prioritized work, right? So the nexus is important.
And Jeff, am I correct, and Nico, in my understanding that these would actually be dedicated to the task force rather than housed at the lab where they would just go into the normal rotation with the other tools that we have?
If I can speak to that real quick, sorry to jump on you there, Jeff. So to get down to the minutia for you so you're tracking, I appreciate that, is we're looking for, it ultimately comes to 3 Celebrites. They have a different 3 units. One is going to Longmont SIU, at least that's where I would like it to go to, because that is also a drug task force inside of Longmont itself. They need that to work on their cases that we don't do anything with unless they ask for our assistance. The next one is going to the drug task force itself, because we need that ability, since we have our partnering agencies, to investigate as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. The other last one is tasked with going down to the digital forensic lab. That is the best place for it, because the digital forensic lab takes in cell phones and electronics from all over the county, which is actually helping the masses. And that's the logic behind that. Same with the gray key, because the lab down there, again, is helping the populace with the whole, everybody, not just limited to whether it's a drug task force here or SIU, which is up in Longmont. It's helping out the masses for the whole Boulder County community.
I think you pretty much nailed it. I was just going to add besides them being issued directly to those units that investigate for that purpose, when you go to the general like funding method of trying to obtain this, it's always going to compete with every other crime in the county. That is the difference here, in that it is opioid money. So essentially, they're not going to be the ones that are waiting because they would be open for that purpose, if that makes sense. Plus, the lab is always going to need the resource, just because we go to a lot of training every year. We're a lot more advanced than the normal user, if that makes sense. So if you get a device, like if you have an overdose victim who updated their software on their phone the day before, they may not be able to get into it in the drug task force, but if they give it to us, we may be able to get into it, if that makes sense. So there's just different levels of trying to gain access to these devices too.
So I do want to be conscious of the clock. We have, to allow time to review some other projects, and we will have a vote. So unless anyone objects, I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. All right. So as I mentioned before, we sent out a packet of supplemental information for all of our 25 project areas. Some of the questions that we asked were reflective of your feedback in previous ROC meetings. So we did ask for additional project background information, supporting evidence on the intervention, the intended impact and outcomes for the funding, as well as any additional information that they could provide on intended service population or intended service numbers. And so, as I mentioned, we do have that packet ready to go if folks have really specific questions dedicated to specific projects, but otherwise just want to open the floor to see if there are questions, general reflections on the suite of programs or a specific program or funding ask related to one of the programs. And then we'll move forward talking about blocking concerns and a vote on the projects.
Claire, you have your hand up?
I do, thank you. So is this the time then to ask questions about any of the projects and materials that are in the packet, just if we want to elaborate on them a little bit more? Is that what this time is for?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad Lexi, is she still here? Yeah, there she is. Yeah, oh no, I'm sorry. Nope. It was not public health. It was mental health partners and their request for community health worker support $80,600 for community health workers. And that's described as addressing social determinants of health. And I don't doubt the value of community health workers in general in the field of mental health and public health for that matter. But I did wonder whether these services really are sufficiently linked to addiction prevention, treatment and recovery. Again, sort of similar question, is this the right pot of money to fund this particular program?
I think in the information about the project description, they said what the sort of outreach and engagement approach would be around SUD and addiction in general, but I'm not sure if Tucker, is there any additional information about the dedication of this staff directly to SUD treatment or recovery support?
Not specifically, but this one was also linked with the training request for 15,000, which was to include some specific SUD training for the community health worker team. So the idea was then to provide training specific to opioid use disorder and substance use disorder overall to the community health workers, and then increase the community health worker team by one additional member.
And that person would support the training capacity. Is that right, Tucker?
Say that one more time, Robin.
I believe that additional staff person would support the training capacity ongoing.
I don't remember them including anything about the training capacity, because the training itself was to go through a separate organization that provided professional training, but more to expand the general knowledge of the community health workers to include some substance use specific education.
Yeah, the way I read it was a $15,000 request for training of existing community health workers, specifically on addiction outreach and prevention. And I guess maybe I read too much into it, but I assume this training would be used for the existing community health workforce. And of course, if we were to approve an additional one, it would apply to that too. But there are existing community health workers, as I understand it, and this training as a standalone request would help the existing program be able to better do outreach to people with substance use disorders.
Yeah, I think community health workers are sort of, the first point of touch out into the community as an outreach effort and engagement effort. Claire, you started your question with what's the role of community health workers overall. And so really using this asset and providing training and capacity for training is a way to expand an existing resource.
Yeah, so anyway, I guess just that was one of the uses that I wanted to understand a little bit better with respect to how closely tailored that ask was to the area that we're addressing, as opposed to general outreach for behavioral health services. Just looking, I think that was the only other one in addition to what we already discussed that I had questions about.
Are there other council members' questions or reflections on the additional project level information? Any blocking concerns coming up?
Could you describe what you're looking for here in blocking concerns? This would be something that's a non-starter for any of us.
Yeah, that's correct. There's something glaring that jumped out at you that would say we do not want to go into this area or provide this level of service, or concerns about, past outcomes that were articulated.
Well, I'll just start here. I have tremendous respect for Sheriff Kelly, for his history, for the challenging work that he and the district attorney are doing on investigating distribution of these substances. I think the public would be surprised to have opioid settlement monies going towards tools that are investigatory and prosecution oriented. And I don't doubt that these are very important tools. I think they've made a very compelling case that they ought to have these in the proverbial toolbox. They seem very, very valuable. But I think, the interdiction, the successful prosecution stops that. It imposes a criminal penalty on an individual and potentially disrupts a network. But what we know from, 60 years of the war on drugs is that there's always somebody else waiting to take the place. There's always somebody else who's happy to serve that customer, and that's why resources have shifted towards the demand side instead of the supply side. Let's address the demand. Let's try to work on prevention. Let's work on pro-social behaviors. Let's work on recovery and treatment. And so I've no doubt these would be very valuable tools for law enforcement and prosecution. But I would have a hard time approving the funds for the three requests that are related to law enforcement.
Nuria, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling, right? And I think you heard the questions that I've asked, and I'm in a similar position as Claire. Like, I struggle with the appropriateness of these dollars for this particular purpose. But I want to be clear that to me, it's not so much that it's a blocking concern, because I think that there's sometimes when there would be some tools that make sense to me. But I hope it signals too that for some of these things, we're going to need a lot more information. And I just appreciate the additional information that was brought towards the group today. But I am, I guess, struggling with the purpose of these funds and what our expectation is on the nexus between the use of these funds and harm reduction strategies, knowing, frankly, that there is a nexus between sort of stopping the supply side that has something and prosecuting those, right, as that moves forward. It's a struggle as I'm thinking about what the appropriate use is, especially if those funds, if these requests have not been made in the course of other budgetary processes. And I want to be fair too, because we haven't asked that question of every single thing that has come to this group and the package on whether that process has been followed, or whether this is just, a great use of these particular funds at this time, right? We've got this ability, but it is a struggle for me to put the nexus on some of the law enforcement activities that go beyond interdiction or just the sort of the working on this particular topic because you just never know what else these tools can be used for as that moves forward. And it's a struggle as I sit here. So
I think with this first group of projects, it's going to be hard to fully answer all the questions that you might have, especially the nexus to the source of funds. I do think the staff group has done a really good job vetting that. Many of them manage human services investment dollars in others arenas. And so they're used to looking at that duplication of funding question. So, and I think it's important to also note that these shovel ready projects were identified for a reason as well. One suggestion I have, and it's up for question, is whether or not we want to do a separate vote on the Sheriff's Office project and see if we can move the other projects forward. Wanting just to respect the process as well as the time, but I also don't want to shut down the conversation. Lexi, I think you had your hand up next, and then Nuria again.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, so I'm kind of taking in a variety of perspectives right now. I'm curious if we have information on whether other regional opioid settlement groups are funding this kind of work, if that would give us some insight into their thinking behind it. They may have had some of these conversations and have some additional perspectives to provide.
So off the top of my head, I am not aware. I have not heard of other regions that are funding these types of tools. I've been on a few calls where learning collaborative type conversations where we've shared generally where our funds are going, but sort of at a higher level, I haven't really had any conversations about specific programs that are being funded, but it is something I could easily find out. I know a lot of the regions are posting their plans now that they have been submitted and we've passed all those deadlines. A lot of them are posting those answers on their respective websites, so I'm happy to look into it.
Nuria?
Sorry, just another quick question. I'm full of questions today. I apologize. I noticed that some of these, and it's for all of them, not just the ones that we've been talking most about today. I'm curious about what ongoing really means in this phase. True Narc, for example, was a one-time. The other two were ongoing. How long is ongoing? But that's probably a question for all of these projects because funds are limited, right? Maybe some clarity on that would be great.
Yeah, so I think we were just trying to quantify what requests might potentially come up in later funding periods because they're going to continue to need these resources or otherwise are, I shouldn't say depending on, but thinking of these as a bit of a sustainable funding source. And so we wanted to identify those, and then we wanted to call out the ones that are true one-time requests. So maybe they just are providing some bridge funding and there is a sustainability plan outside of the opioid abatement dollars to continue funding that program or staff moving forward. So that's sort of our language being used there, and it's not super defined, but it was really just to give us an idea of what are we looking for or what are we potentially looking at needing to carry forward with these dollars as we continue these 18 years of funds.
And I'll just remind the group, and to Lexi's point as well, interdiction was identified as a specific category and use of funds. So I would be surprised if other communities aren't looking at this, but again, we can find that information out. Harold, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think to Nuria's question, I think I have this question for every program about the ongoing funds and what does that mean? And at least in terms of how I'm looking at this from our organization's perspective is I almost see it as a beta test. And then as an organization, we need to look at what is the success of what we're doing. And if it seems like it's working, then we as an organization need to see what we can do to build this into our ongoing budgets. That way we can continue to create a bigger pie for folks to participate in. So I think operationally, at least from my perspective, we have a responsibility to figure out, okay, if it's working, do we just need to build this into our operating budgets?
Yeah, I will say in terms of our strategic planning, which is sort of the direction of the work moving forward, a fair amount of work needs to be done around developing an understanding of the impacts that we intend to see both from the respective programs and then more broadly, what is the impact that we'd like to see across the region. And so being able to sort of measure against those intended impacts will give us a little bit of an understanding of what does need to be sustained moving forward to keep us in alignment with our strategic priorities and, of those programs, what are our avenues to continue funding them.
Kelly, I anticipate that these will be annual contracts with an evaluation period that we are planning. So answering these questions is part of the process.
Yeah, so one of the last things we were going to speak to is we're putting out a request for proposal for evaluation assistance. And so these sort of design questions of how we're actually monitoring the programs moving forward are folded into that contracting process, the monitoring and evaluation and ongoing funding process.
I wonder if we can return to the question of, are there any specific questions about specific projects or blocking concerns? And again, I don't want to shut down the conversation, but these projects have been reviewed and vetted by a large group of people. And they are just our first attempt at investing these dollars into the community. And continuing our process. So I invite any other specific project questions from the packet. We realize we put the burden on you all to review that information, recognizing that we would not have the time or space to do full presentations on every project. So just opening the floor for any additional questions.
Not hearing any additional questions. Robin, did you want me to move us forward to vote?
Yes, please.
So I will, kick it off to Robin to do the formal vote, but I did just want to queue up a little bit of contextual information about point number 2. I had sort of alluded to this early in our discussion, but some of our projects, their funding asks have changed a little bit, mostly due to inflation, costs of salaries going up just in the time since the original asks were made. Some of the changes like Nico and crew had mentioned around the licensing, the costs of those licenses changing over time. And so one of the asks we have up for a vote today is whether the council approves of utilizing some of our dollars that we've pulled down in this first year to allow programs to adjust up to 10% to account for some of those changes.
So the first vote is related to supporting the slate of projects. Again, you have the option to remove a project to get further information, as we've discussed, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, per our bylaws, we're asking it's a majority vote.
Correct.
And yeah, that's per our IGA. So Claire, I see your hand.
Yep, thank you. I would like to pull the Celebrate, the True Narc, and Gray Key out and vote on the remaining slate first and then vote on those separately?
So I wonder if we do sort of a Robert's rules, Claire, with your motion to remove the project and then vote on that. Does that seem appropriate?
Yeah, I could, yeah, I wasn't sure what procedure you wanted to use. If we're at that point, yeah, I move that we remove from the slate Gray Key, Celebrite, and True Narc for a separate vote.
And is there a second to Claire's motion?
Second that.
Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand.
Maybe we should use the raise hand function so it's a little easier to see.
If it helps, I can stop sharing my screen as well.
So I'm seeing 4 raised hands in support of Claire's motion. Which leaves, I'm trying to count the rest.
Do you want us to keep our hands up to make it easier?
Yeah, I think we have 5 who do not support. If there's staff that can help me count that, that would be appreciated.
That's correct, Robin.
So Claire, I think your motion does not pass. So would someone like to put forth a motion to move the remaining slate of projects? Approve the remaining slate, the full slate of projects?
I can. I motion to support the remaining slate of projects put forward by the Opioid Operations Board.
Second.
Okay,
I'll second that. If you need a second, I support the full slate.
I think I heard a second. Thank you,
That was
Joe.
Pelly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. And could I have a vote on the full slate? So it looks like the full slate has been approved with, if I'm reading the screen correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, with Nerea opposed. Is that it?
My hand is up.
Oh, your hand is up. I apologize.
Yeah, I'd want more information in the future about some of the items, but I would not approve the full slate because of the former vote.
Okay.
So just, could you clarify how many voting members we have here? I only saw 8 hands up, and so that's why I'm confused. Robin, you are a voting member, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe there's 9 voting members.
Oh, okay, and your hand wasn't up, so but you were a yes vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the motion passes and the slate of projects will move forward. And staff will pay very close attention to your questions and concerns, and especially around sources of funds and appropriate use of funds, as well as the evaluation component. All right, Kelly, do you want to move us forward? Anjali, I see your hand up. Is that from the vote or did you have a question?
Sorry, it was from the vote.
And
Joe, hands as well. Are you good?
Yeah, one point of order. I'm going to be leaving in a few weeks and leaving office in a few weeks. And so will that transfer over automatically to the sheriff-elect, or how does that work? Am I appointed to this commission as a person or in position?
Your position, so that will be transfer.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the next vote we need to do is related to the 10% increase in project asks relative to the reality of our world with inflation and staffing issues. And if the board would support leaving that in the discretion of the opioid ops team and the staff to negotiate those changes when they're doing contracts. Do I have a motion? Maybe I just made it.
I'll second it or motion it, whichever you choose.
Thank you, Joe. All right, should we vote on that motion? Susan, do you have your hand up?
Oh, no, I was just voting, voting yes. Yep.
People started voting. Okay. I'm seeing full support of that. Thank you. All right, Kelly, I'll hand it back to you for our next item.
Okay, thank you. So respective of time, I'm going to move through this next portion pretty quickly. This is mostly informational, so spoiler alert, we do not actually have a formal recommendation on use of the state infrastructure grant, but we did want to make council members aware of it because there are 2 funding opportunities in the next year. And while we don't have a recommendation for this first drop of funds where applications would be due in January, we did want to make you aware that this is an opportunity that we can revisit if we want to apply by spring. So this is from the Attorney General's office. The overview of these grants is that the purpose is really to promote capital investments moving forward. And it's also really looking for cross-regional collaboration. So really kind of brick and mortar is what we've heard. In terms of eligibility, who can apply? State entities, any municipalities, so governmental entities or regions such as Boulder County. Nonprofits can apply for some of these funds, but really they need to be identified as an implementation agency in an application coming from one of the above entities. Priority criteria, you can see here, I'm not going to read through all of them. However, do want to highlight what I had mentioned before, that priority for this first year of funding is really to be given to capital construction and brick and mortar investments for regions that have been underfunded or over impacted by the opioid epidemic. Funding requirements and timelines. There are 2 funding drops within each year. So our first funding drop, again, we would need to apply by January of this year with the funds dropping in spring. And then there's another application period in the spring for funds being dropped in the summer. Applications that don't receive funding in the first cycle can resubmit. Funding can be spent over 2 fiscal years, and there is no maximum dollar amount asked to those requests. However, anything above $500,000 or more needs to be thoroughly vetted and provide some additional information. Moving pretty quickly here, so I apologize. Oops, excuse me. So this is a snapshot of the funds as they're available and the timeline to submitting some of those grant applications. So you can see that the first year is 50% of the funds, and then we have each additional year, the funding amount available will go down. So again, January is our first application period with funds coming in spring, spring application period, funds coming in summer.
And Kelly, these amounts are not per county. This is per state, the full state.
Yes,
right?
Correct. Yeah. So again, we don't have a formal recommendation right now. This is something that we're sort of staying aware of. We wanted to make the council aware of. We do think that just timing wise, because the emphasis is really on brick and mortar investments, and cross-regional collaboration, that it would reasonably take us a little bit of time to pull together a grant application. So if we are going to go for some of these dollars, really looking at that second round application period as something that we would be entering into. But any questions or concerns about that? Yeah, Susan.
Not about this specifically, but I'm curious how much you know or we know about the distribution of the 150 million, the CVS lawsuit, that opioid. I'm assuming there's not much detailed information about how much Boulder County will receive, but just thought I would ask.
That's a great question. I actually do not know what the Boulder County allocation is for that settlement at this point. I don't know if Jim or others have heard any additional details on that.
No, we've not heard anything yet.
Yeah, I know it's brand new. I just was curious if they even were able to say they would get us the information by a certain date, but just thought I would ask.
We can reach out to the AG's office and see if they have any information. It's so recent that it happened that they may not have really figured that stuff out just yet.
Great, thanks.
I'm sorry, Claire, I see your hand up.
Yes, it is. Do we know how long a period of time we would have to expend these funds if we were to receive a grant?
So applicants can apply for 1 or 2 year grants. And if you apply for a 1 year grant, you have the 1 year to spend within. And if you apply for a 2 year grant, you have the 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, just thinking about infrastructure and capital improvements, and sometimes they need long lead times. And actually, could I have a follow-up here. If we wanted to purchase beds in an existing facility, in other words, provide some funding to set aside beds, that's a service. It's not really, strictly speaking, a capital expenditure. We couldn't possibly hope to build a facility with new beds in 2 years, let alone 10 probably. But do you know whether they would be eligible for a purpose such as that, where you're purchasing a service in lieu of constructing one from scratch?
Yeah, so what I will say is I'd have to look at the information more specifically to make sure that that's an approved purpose, but I would, if I had to guess, I would say yes. While brick and mortar and infrastructure is really prioritized in this first round, they are using that terms pretty broadly and have let us know that operational expenses and expanding programs that are in those same original 5 approved purpose areas as our general abatement funds, that if there are programs that need some additional capacity and expansion, that would be considered. But I'm happy to look into it more specifically.
So if members of the council have ideas in this arena, and Kelly, I'm assuming you'll send out this PowerPoint so they have the detail that you reviewed, then we welcome your ideas to come forth in our next meeting for that March or April submission.
And there are 2.
No, go ahead. I just asked if that made sense.
It does. Is the advisory or the working group also going to be going back to their agencies to make recommendations on using these funds?
So we have talked about this in the operations group. We did not come up with a formal recommendation. We wanted to see what the council had to say in terms of avenues to pursue or a method to kind of approach this, respective of the short funding timeline. And again, that emphasis on looking across regions for a collaborative approach.
Harold, I see your hand.
So this is probably a form question. So, for example, we're working with Recovery Cafe in terms of building a facility adjacent to our fully supportive housing locations in our community. if they requested us to apply for this grant as a municipality to support their capital construction, do we need to bring that through this group, or is that one that just goes through as a municipality request?
Kelly, do you know the answer?
I don't actually know the answer to that one. I would imagine that it could go through just as a municipality request. I don't know if it needs to be approved by this council, because you would be applying as a municipality with MH, or excuse me, did you say it was MHP was the agency that would?
Recovery Cafe.
Excuse me. Yeah, so they would be your implementation partner within that grant. But I guess that would maybe be a question for the group of whether or not these grants would want to be reviewed by the council at large to make sure that we're coordinating anything across the region as a whole.
Yeah, I think we can look into that and get back to the council on I think that there's probably a precise answer to that question. Given that these are somewhat focused at a regional level as an infrastructure project or a cross-regional collaboration, there may be more emphasis on having these come through a council, but that's something that we can easily get answered.
Okay. I just didn't want us to outrun our headlights and do something as a municipality that should go through this group.
So Kelly, I'm aware we're out of time. Is there anything on the agenda that we can postpone or ask, communicate via email? I know we have to,
absolutely.
We have to
Absolutely.
schedule.
Yeah, so the last thing we were going to talk about is our shift towards strategic planning and setting our strategic priorities. We talked about it a little bit in our operations group yesterday. So this will be included in the slide deck. You can look at what their feedback was. The remaining questions that we had for the group, which we can facilitate via email, is really just, if these are the kind of bodies of work in front of us as we set and guide our strategic priorities, getting a better understanding of the level of oversight and input from council members in terms of where you feel comfortable delegating the work and some of these decisions to the operations group versus, which areas the council would really like to be more involved in that process.
So Lexi, I see your hand up, but I want to make sure that before we go, Joe, I just want to acknowledge you. This is your last meeting, and the work that you've been doing for decades around these related issues, and just really want to thank you for your leadership and your service.
Thank you. I'll do my best to catch Curtis up on this group and the work that you're doing so that he can step in next month and be knowledgeable.
Yeah, and if he would like any more individual orientation, Joe, just let us know.
Will do. He's in new sheriff school the next couple of weeks, so he's gone, but we'll catch him up when he gets back.
Okay. Lexi, did you want to add anything?
Just a lingering question. I know we've brought up at a couple of meetings about whether we're going to add 10% indirects to these awards or not. I just didn't have closure on that one.
I think it would potentially fall within the 10% adjustment that we had just allowed projects to make for any additional requests that they'd like to make, or excuse me, additional dollars that they'd like to make to their original asks. But I don't know if that.
Okay, my impression was that that was related to inflation, related to salaries, which we don't have any control over. So it feels like a different pot of money to me.
My recollection, Lexi, is that indirect was meant for the work of the council, not individual projects. But I could be wrong, and we could certainly revisit with council to see what that looks like. I don't think
bring it up because it's just a continued pain point for us.
I hear you. I just don't think we have the answer for you today.
Okay.
Well, do we know, Lexi really raises a very important question. Do we know whether some of these requests already built in those indirect costs?
I would have to go back through them. So I'm not totally certain on that but I'm happy to look back through the proposals.
I'll just say that we will have to go through some kind of contracting process and budgeting for each of the projects. So we will want to have an answer to this question in terms of whether we want to put a cap on the indirect rates for individual projects.
All right, Claire, do you want to close us out? I think we need to let people go
Yeah,
on.
okay. Well, let's see here. Yeah, I was just pulling up the agenda again. And so thank you for teeing this up here, just for any additional reflections, input on the process so far, what's gone well, what's missing, what would you like to see more of? And then Robin, you'll send out a doodle poll to create a regular meeting schedule for 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I've just opened it up to any final thoughts on the work we've done so far. It looks like when the big hand passes the 12 and the little hands on the 5, people are ready to go. So, well, thank you for putting the process together. And I know I'll have other opportunities to thank Sheriff Pelley for his work, but I don't think I can thank him enough. So every opportunity I get to thank him, I will do that. So thank you, Sheriff.
And I just really want to appreciate the council's tolerance as we build the process. You know, these first steps out of the gate are often a little bit clunky. So really appreciate people's engagement and working through that with us today.
So, okay, well, I think we have gotten through our agenda. Thanks everybody for showing up prepared and ready with questions, and look for that doodle poll for 2023. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.